everyone, it's Dana again. Today I want to show you the 2 rows that make up what I call the Rivulet Stitch. Years ago I had found a needle knitting lace pattern that was called the Rivulet Stitch. Rivulet stands for little rivers, little streams. And I tried to recreate the needle knit pattern and ended up just frustrated because you had to do yarn overs and move stitches and knit into the back and all kinds of convoluted things. Well, then I eventually stumbled on what I'm calling my own Rivulet Stitch. Makes a cute little lacy fabric, and these little streams, these little strings, these little rivers are what make it the Rivulet Stitch. So this is done with a worsted weight wool on just a 3/4 inch gauge loom. This one was done, this wool here, this yarn here is, see there's my little stream right there. This is done with a heavier yarn. This is the two-tone Rivulet wrap. This is the Pagosa Springs scarf or shawl. And this is the same Pagosa Springs shawl or scarf, but on a smaller gauge loom. So you can see the holes are a little bit tighter together. There's my little streams. So it's not a difficult stitch to learn, and it makes for some cool fabric. So let me get things ready and we'll teach you the 2 rows. There are basically 2 rows that make up the Rivulet Stitch pattern on the loom. I'm using here a 3/4 inch gauge loom, 3/4 of an inch from center of that peg to the center of its adjacent peg, and I'm using just a worsted weight yarn. I've already cast on, done a few rows just to get going. So let's begin. The first row that you will work is just what I call 2K on each peg. 2K stands for 2 E-wrap knits on each peg. Pretty simple once you understand what it is we're doing. Here's my peg number 1. I'm going to E-wrap knit it once, E-wrap knit it twice. That's my 2 Ks for 2 E-wrap knits. I do that on every peg. So the pattern will say 2K all, which means do that 2 E-wrap knit stitch on every peg. So I'm E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, and move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2, and move to the next peg. E-wrap 1, and E-wrap 2. So that's it. One row is just the 2K all. Your next row is what I'm calling the Rivulet Purl Stitch, and you're going to do the RP, the Rivulet Purl Stitch, on every peg. The Rivulet Purl Stitch is a 2-step stitch. The first step is you purl like you normally would. I'm working from left to right here on my Rivulet Purl row. Doesn't matter if you're working from right to left. You'll perform the same technique regardless of which direction you're going. Okay, so the Rivulet Purl 2-step on this one peg is, the first step is a regular purl, just the kind of purl you've always learned, where you put your working yarn below the loop that's on the peg, pull it up through, and take it off. So that's the first half of the Rivulet Purl. You just do a regular purl. The second half of this stitch is you bring your working yarn back and do a second purl on the same exact peg, but you're coming from kind of the opposite direction, so to speak. So there you have it. And when you snug up your yarn, you're going to have a lump of stuff. You're going to have several strands of yarn sitting out here. That's good. That's what you want. Okay, so let's go to the second peg. We're going to do the Rivulet Purl on it as well. step number 1, I'm going to do a regular purl. Put it back on the loop or on the peg, and then I come back the opposite direction and do another purl. And I leave my working yarn on the outside here of the loom and kind of snug it up. Third peg, we're going to do a regular purl and purl again, and that makes up my Rivulet purl stitch. One more time. Purl, and then we're going to go backwards kind of, and purl that same peg one more time. And leave the working yarn on the outside of the loom. Purl. Come back and purl it a second time. Same peg, second time. Next peg. Purl. I'm going to come back and purl it again. And then we move to the next peg. Do one purl and second purl. Working yarn stays on the outside. Purl and purl. Working yarn stays on the outside and purl and purl. Okay, so we'll just repeat those 2 rows. That's what makes the Rivulet stitch. Just as a heads up, when you start your 2K row again, because you have all of this stitch on the outside, it's going to feel weird, but you're doing it exactly right. You E-wrap it and you lift that entire group of yarn up and off the loom. That's 1, 2. Next peg. Again, take all that yarn, E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2. Again, take that entire glob of yarn, I don't know what else to call it, E-wrap 1, E-wrap 2. Okay? So that is all there is to the Rivulet stitch.